may know that, yes, I have 7 children, and 16 years ago, my twins were diagnosed with autism. My son was very severely affected. He had no language, and after months and months and months and months of one-to-one ABA, 45 hours a week, he still did not even have the very concept of language, no receptive language, didn't even know what it was. By observing him and speaking to people who are adults on the spectrum, I developed a unique filming method that's come to be known as discrete video modeling. The first day he saw these videos, he said his first word. And here is Max's graph before we started Gemini, or discrete video modeling. You can see this red line is neurotypical language. The blue is gifted language acquisition over a person's lifetime. And this was Max down here. In fact, it's so low you can't even see it. Here's where we started discrete video modeling, or DVM. His language just took off. He crossed the typical mean when he was 7 years old, crossed the gifted mean when he was 14, and both he and his twin sister went to college when they were 16, and they're very verbal. I went on to create a platform called Gemini after my twins, and it is the platform for which we deliver these discrete video models. In about 4 months after we launched to the public, we were in 35 countries. We are now expanding into Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, French, and eventually the world's languages. Gemini is getting a lot of attention because the testimonials on our website on Facebook are really astonishing. In fact, it's almost the miracle of the minute on this website. But I'm not going to talk about the anecdotes today. Today I'm really going to focus on research. I'm a huge believer in peer-reviewed research because, as we know with autism parents, there's a lot out there, and we need to be able to sift through it. I wouldn't even go to the public with Gemini, even though I knew it worked, until we were published. Most of us all know that video modeling is considered evidence-based. In fact, the National Standard Report has it as established, where even PECS is only considered emerging. The first video modeling research goes all the way back to the 80s with Dr. Charlap, where she found video modeling to be effective. Children learned, generalized their conversational skills, and maintained conversational speech over a 15-month period. She then thought, it works so well, let's do a study comparing video modeling to live therapy. And 11 years later, she published this seminal work on video modeling, where we found that video modeling led to faster acquisition of tasks than in vivo modeling and was effective in promoting generalization. Why is this important? Well, there is a shortage of therapists on global proportions. In the United States alone, we would need 2 million therapists to cover our population, and we have less, actually we need more than 2 million, I think it's more closer to 3 million, and we have less than 200,000. In the United States, there are more therapists here than there is in the rest of the world. So the only way, and Charlap knows this, and everybody knows this, that we are going to reach the world is through technology. We have to be able to leverage ourselves. There are many meta-analyses on video modeling of the hundreds and hundreds of published studies. There are even, in the state's Board of Education websites, there are how-to for teachers, how to create videos for your students. It's very well accepted to be effective. But it's completely irrational and, like I say, it's optimistic to think that teachers have enough time to make videos. I go to these special education conferences, and there are how-to pull-out sessions to have the teachers learn how to make the videos, and they get all excited and they go back to the classroom and they know, I don't have time to make these. Gemini is so successful because we made the videos for the teachers. Also, as everybody knows that video modeling is evidence-based for children with conversational skills and social skills, young children with autism. But Gemini is purporting to help people of all ages and all diagnoses. And I have a lot of professionals that will say, where are you getting that? That's not in the research, that you can use video modeling for that. Well, researchers in the UK published research on aphasia for older people, stroke victims, and they found that video modeling was fantastic, especially because the adults were able to access therapy outside of normal clinical hours. The second study was published also with adults, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds with strokes. They found that it was efficacious, acceptable, and gave participants a high degree of independence. We also have research on video modeling going back to the early 90s with Down syndrome. Biederman himself alone published 4 separate papers using video modeling for Down syndrome. So there's a lot of research out there that people aren't aware of. In fact, some of this stuff is on the ASHA website itself. Now we're going to skip to Gemini-specific research. The first paper that was published was done by representatives of 3 universities, including the head of the Department of Psychology for Princeton. Now, I love this study, even though the sample size is relatively small, because it's the first time that it shows video modeling with adults on the spectrum, using it for articulation, reading, and advanced vocabulary. As our population in the ASD community ages, they have to have a rich vocabulary and be proficient readers if they're going to be independent. So here you see at baseline, most of the students did not know the material, and that was expected. But as you see with this one, just by testing him, he achieved mastery. We see this all the time with autism. The problem is you go back 3 months later, and he's down to 0 again. This unlearning of information is pretty common with autism. Well, during intervention, they all achieved mastery in their vocabulary, and then 3 months later, after the intervention had stopped, they were still at 100% mastery. This is an important thing that we're going to come back to. Here we have articulation. As you can see, their baseline was down to 0. This is so important because conventional wisdom says that people over the age of about 14 can't improve in their articulation. In fact, insurance companies won't even cover speech therapy for older people over than 14. That's just the time when students are motivated to want to be understood. Before that, they don't really care because everybody reads their minds. And so when you're a teenager, you want people to understand you. No more therapy, no more funds. We just proved here with Gemini that it's possible to teach people articulation, and it works. Hopefully, we'll do more research with this to encourage insurance companies to cover it for older people. Now, this is one of my favorite slides in the whole presentation because typical research with autism is done with younger children, like under 6 years old, and done in clinics with a very sterile environment, and typically the gains from the clinics do not transfer to the chaos of the classroom. And academics are always bemoaning the fact that teachers don't use their interventions, they keep them in the drawer, and for the teacher, the learning curve is too steep, and they find that they don't work anyway most of the time, so they don't even try. With this study, they found, they give a survey of the teachers who used it in the classroom, and these teachers found students' participation in video modeling was problematic, strongly disagree or disagree. Student participation in video modeling was beneficial, agree or strongly agree. I would be willing to implement video modeling in the future, agree or strongly agree. The reason why it was so easy for them is because all the videos were pre-made. It was all Gemini. And having people use your intervention is half the battle. So this is some other research that was done with Gemini. Our first non-clinical trial was done in a teaching classroom for Gonzaga University. We had 8 students with autism. 2 were nonverbal despite 3 years of very intensive therapy. They didn't even have any sound imitation, nothing. The trial was started in September, and by January, the 2 nonverbal children were speaking in full sentences. So we decided to expand it. We got an IRB from Gonzaga University, and we expanded to 5 classrooms full of preschoolers. And this time we wanted to measure the different ways you use the program in the classroom because we didn't want to get false negatives when we went to the public. And here we found the very huge difference on the gains depending on how Gemini is used in the classroom. I'm going to show you a video next of students in this high-intensity classroom. All these children have autism. One has Down syndrome. When we first started this trial, they would sit there very stoically in their seats, not engaging with their neighbor, not looking side to side, just sort of staring in a typical autism glance. This is 3 weeks later after the introduction of Gemini. In this video, you can see the children interacting, talking to their neighbor, discussing things back and forth, laughing. The social skills for these children improved greatly.
Lizard. Bear. Bear.
This is the most encouraging slide from this whole study because this shows the difference in the verbal ability of these children. So we have nonverbal children after 3 weeks, they made gains, which was exciting. These minimally verbal students coming into the study had single word labels and could answer single step instructions. These children were low verbal, but they were just about to mainstream, and most people could not tell the difference between them and any typical child. So the difference in the verbal abilities of these two groups was vast, but they learned at the same rate using Gemiini, which means that these children can mainstream, which will alleviate the pressure for funds, which can be more better used on the children who really still need the help. This shows the power of Gemiini with academics. So we pulled 12 children from this study who had been trying to learn either colors or numbers for the entire year. The study was done in May. And you can see at baseline, they really hadn't learned anything over the year. 5 days after watching Gemiini, look at how their scores jumped. You get the feeling that they had watched it just for another week, they would have all gotten 100%. Now, do I believe that Gemiini was able to teach these children what the teachers, these really good teachers, by the way, couldn't teach them in 9 months? No, I don't. I believe that they had gaps in their understanding that made mastery impossible, little tiny ones. Gemiini just filled in those missing dots, and so they could connect them. This next study was done by Dr. Maria Gilmore, who's the head of the new BCBA program at Portland State University. And what researchers looked at their research in Spokane, and they said, we want to know if it's just putting a giant screen in the classroom, or is Gemiini somehow different than other kinds of video modeling, because we've never seen these results before. So Peter Bell, who's at the Eden Center now, and Dr. William Mobley, who is the chairman of the Department of Neurosciences at UCSD, put together a study, and they helped us design a study that was a double-blind comparative study between standard video modeling and Gemiini's DVM. This time we used a school district in Inglewood, California, very disadvantaged children in the summer session, so more profoundly affected. So it was sort of stacking the deck against ourselves, but we really wanted to see if this was working. And we had preschoolers all the way up through middle schoolers. And Dr. Gilmore compared the use of the two different types of video modeling. And yes, we did see that not only was there a tremendous difference in the efficaciousness of the two programs, but Gemiini outperformed it by almost 900%. Now, why is this happening? Oh, actually, one more slide on that study. This is really exciting because this is about non-responders. My son was a non-responder, so they're near and dear to my heart. 5 of the children in the Inglewood study had no language coming into this trial at all, no receptive and no expressive. After 5 days of watching Gemiini, 4 of the 5 gained language. 3 of them receptively, and 1 said his first word expressively. None of the children who saw standard video modeling first learned from it, except 1 child did learn something from the standard video modeling after he was primed with Gemiini and learned 3 words from Gemiini first. And if we had the videos working, you'd be able to see that it's very common that children learn better from their environment after they've been watching Gemiini videos. The next study that we're doing is ongoing. It's a global study. It's being conducted by universities here in the United States, in Mexico City, and in Amman, Jordan. The first leg was already completed here in the United States in a school district in California. 150 students this time. And this is not a disadvantaged school district. In fact, this is the most well-funded school district I have ever seen. One of the campuses is solely devoted to special needs, and they have a therapy pool in the middle of the school. This is a public school. It's an unbelievable program. These kids have the best of the best from the time they're 1.5. And I thought, okay, we're going to give this study, we're going to give these kids Gemiini for 2 weeks to see how their language can improve. How can you improve on the best in 2 weeks? I really wasn't expecting much. The results actually shocked even me. In 2 weeks, they improved by 54% on their receptive skills and 43% on their expressive skills. So this same study is being done with another 150 students in Mexico and another 150 in Amman, Jordan. It will be the only international multilingual autism study that I'm aware of and the largest one that I'm aware of, so it's very exciting. This is a teacher who was going to talk to you about her experience during the trial. But what I'm going to say, explain what she's going to say is that what she found using Gemiini is that it sort of unlocked a door in the children's brain, and that all of these skills that they had been teaching them for the years that they've worked with these children started to come flooding out. And it was so encouraging for the teachers because they realized they had been learning them. They know what we've taught them. They just weren't able to use it. And somehow Gemiini unlocked a door and let it out. They're seeing the same thing with MRT, by the way, which is very interesting, that students who are walking and getting MRT therapy who didn't have any additional therapy all now are talking and are using all of these skills that they were taught before. So there is something definitely going on neurologically at a very deep level with these videos.
I just have to say, this has been the coolest experience for me. But the last month, I was working with a group of kids, and all of a sudden, my children that absolutely were usually spinning and running and doing all the craziness, they were watching what I was doing, and they were modeling the exact body movements that I was doing, which are not easy for their bodies. And so I kind of went, okay, something is different, something is going on. I need to find out what's going on because these kids are different than they were a month ago. So I go talk to Ellie, and she said, Gemiini is what we're doing. And so I went and I watched the videos, and I'm like, there's no way that this video can have this kind of carryover in gross motor. How is that possible? But it's possible because it's happening, and I'm seeing it every day now. It's great.
So we are seeing increases in social, emotional, articulation, language, reading, fine motor, gross motor. Definitely there's some sort of a global advancement in their neurologies. And I think this is how we can start to explain it. First of all, 2 dimensions are much easier for our brains to assimilate and to understand than 3 dimensions. Just like a camera, if you take a 3D movie, it takes a lot more data. It's massive amounts of data for 3D movies. And we know with our kids with autism, this is a very common aspect for children with autism. Or they go like this, or they go like this. And I've heard doctors before tell me it's because they're using their peripheral vision. No, they're using their nose to block out their other eye, so they can make everything else 2-dimension. If they're really interested in something, they want to make it clear. So they want to make it 2D. And I talked to a mom with a child with Down syndrome, and she said her son does the same thing. We also know that people on the spectrum have an hyper-connected default network. The default network is sort of like an alternate universe in our mind, and it's where what we use for daydreaming and dreaming. You know, when you're just standing there, kind of spaced out, lost in thought, and you don't really hear what's going on around you, you hear some sort of noise, you have a very far-off look in your face. This is where our children spend a lot of their time. And you can feel when you switch over to your active network, because your kids will say, "Earth to mom," and then all of a sudden you're present, you can hear them as you're in a different universe almost. We believe that Gemiini is climbing into these students' default network and teaching them there, and then pulling them, because we have embedded in the process of the editing visual and auditory anomalies that sort of will wake you up. It's the same feeling you get when you're watching a movie and you're really engrossed in the movie, and then a really bad actor comes on, and it makes you realize, you look around, hey, I'm watching a movie, you're not there anymore. Gemiini does that constantly to kids. And so we believe that we may be bringing this knowledge that we're embedding in the default network where they're comfortable and bringing it to the active network. Remember I talked about the unlearning thing that happens with autism, where you teach them something and the next day they forgot it, or the next month they forgot it? Well, imagine if everything you had to learn in your whole life you learned when you were dreaming. And you wake up, you know it, right? And it's kind of slipping away, gone. But if you write it down right away when you wake up, and you think about it while you're awake, you will remember it. So these poor people with autism, we're teaching them in their dreams. We got to get them awake. So Gemiini also just creates time. A typical therapy hour looks like this, where most of the time is spent on modeling, some maintenance, some data recording, and some prep time. Only about 15% of the therapy hour is spent on generalization, and that's the most important time, where you're getting the kid in their active network, where you can actually have them remember what you're teaching. Unless you have a Sunrise program, and then it's flipped, where you only have a little tiny bit of modeling, and all the rest of this is all generalization. And it's funny because I speak with thousands of parents globally, all over the world. And it's almost universal where the people who are doing ABA, the parents will say, language is coming along great. They can answer, they have receptive language, they understand everything, they're starting to talk, it's wonderful. It's still the social skills, eye contact's not so good, I just wish he would more loving and that sort of thing. The Sunrise parents say just the opposite. Socially, he's got great eye contact, he's very engaged, he can't wait to do stuff, but the language is just not coming there, we're just not hearing any language yet. So those two groups of people are working on different things, and it is working, but there's not enough time in the day to work on both. That's where Gemiini comes in, because you can offload all of the modeling to the computer, and it can be done in the car rides on the way back and forth to school, at bath time some parents use it, during meal times, during downtimes at school when you're not doing other therapy, and the rest of the hour can be spent with generalization. ABA knows this needs to be done. In fact, they've invented a whole new section of ABA called PRT, which is pretty much just constant generalization. But as I talked to one of the leaders in the PRT movement, I said, PRT is great, except you're waiting constantly for that gotcha moment where you can teach them something. But sometimes they're long, there maybe could be 15, 20 minutes between these gotcha moments. And these kids need gotcha, 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 gotcha. They need lots of gotchas. So this, this is a way that you can actually intensify that learning and still keep up with that generalization active paradigm that's been so successful with PRT. We also know from research that we participate viscerally with everything we see on video. This is a study done where they took people in an audience and they put a thermometer on their left hand, and they had them watch a video of a man putting his left hand in ice water. The viewer's left hand's temperature decreased substantially. Their brains thought they themselves were doing it. With Gemiini, we are tricking the viewer's brain into thinking that they themselves are talking. They themselves are making these articulations.
今天我们去动物园去看狮子、熊、斑马和老虎，非常喜欢动物园。
It's obvious that you could, if you watch this video 1,000 times, you would memorize the sequence of sounds. You still not know what you were saying. And that's pretty much what our scripters are doing. They're just memorizing sequences of sound. With Gemiini,
鳄鱼，鳄鱼，鳄鱼，鳄鱼，鳄鱼，鳄鱼。
when you watch it, you can feel your mouth move involuntarily. You cannot help it. You watch that big mouth moving and you just do it. So people with apraxia, they're just mouth moves. Even if they don't want to, it starts to move. And then what we see with younger children is first the mouth moves, a few days later, a few weeks later, sound comes out. Few weeks later, months later, words are coming out because we're tricking their brain into thinking that they themselves are talking. What we decided to do is after that it was working so well, what if we were able to reach inside their mouth and view their tongue and their teeth and everything through an X-ray? And this is also a video that shows ba, ba, ba. It's kind of creepy, actually. When I first put these up on our program, I thought kids are going to be running screaming, but they are enthralled, and this has been the outcome. Just got a call from my son's school SLP who wanted to thank me for sharing these amazing videos. Today she worked with a little girl who up until this point never attempted to mimic sounds, words, etc. She created a session for the B sound with these X-ray videos, and the little girl said buh several times, and she attended better than ever before. When I first put these on our program, within 24 hours we had, I don't know, maybe 200 comments of people whose children had not been responding yet. And they started to with these. So it just needed a deeper level neurologically to see what was going on inside of their mouth. We also believe that Gemiini is affecting the semantic overlap between the auditory and visual planes neurologically that produce the McGurk effect.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed.
If you see someone saying ba, 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 and then the visual change so they're going like this, but the auditory is still saying ba, you hear it switch to fa. Even if you know it's ba, you can't help it. Your brain will hear fa if it sees you do this. Except if you have dyslexia. Then you just hear it the way it is. And we have a rather profound example of why we believe this is happening with a teenager in Santa Monica. She was 13 years old, typical girl in every sense of the word. She just couldn't read at all. She read at a preschool level despite her parents spending $1 million, and I'm not exaggerating, $1 million trying to teach her how to read. I'm going to read what the mom says. Here we go. My daughter had many MRIs, fMRIs, intensive remedial reading instruction, and more. The top experts at UCLA told us she would never be able to read due to the structure of her brain and no semantic overlap of auditory and visual fields. All of these data aside, we tried Gemiini over the summer. In 6 weeks, she began reading for the first time in her life at 13 years old, and she went up 4 grade levels in 6 weeks. This is a miracle. She took a year off after middle school in 8th grade just to focus on reading, and now she's caught up with her peers. So we have a lot of encouraging anecdotes with our dyslexia program, and we're going into research with it pretty soon here. So I'm also very elated to be able to announce that within the next few weeks we'll be launching our verbal behavior and articulation program that was designed by therapists for therapists. And you will, as a therapist, be able to create and assign custom video sessions that back up the live therapy you're doing and prime for the next week's therapy, and it will take you about 3 minutes to do so. In that 3 minutes, your student will have 10 to 15 hours of therapy homework. So when they come ready for your next session, they'll be ready to go. You can test them and move on and move them very quickly. I'm going to be answering questions for quite a while, as long as you guys have questions about particular students, because the more you customize Gemiini, the better the results, and it is very customizable.